They laughed at the old woman who tried to save the weakest mare on the ranch until the day the flood came. Comment below telling me what you thought of this story, giving it a score from 0 to 10, and let me know what city you're watching from. I really want to know if you like my story, and I want to get to know you better, so please subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The first thing I noticed that morning was the old lady in the straw hat standing in the muddy pasture, holding a bucket of bran mash with 2 trembling hands, kneeling in the mud in front of an animal nobody else even looked at. The second thing I noticed was the laughter. It started with Austin, a short, dry laugh like someone spitting, and it spread across the ranch house porch like fire in dry brush. "Miss Martha is feeding the dead," he said, loud enough for her to hear. She heard it. She stayed on her knees. "I am Jim. I am 46 years old, and I have been working at the Hopewell Ranch for almost 20 years. I lost my wife 7 years ago in a highway accident, and since then, life has become a succession of days that all look exactly the same. Waking up before the sun, checking the cattle, fixing fences, going to sleep early. I do not have kids. I do not have much else besides work and the silence that fills the corners of my empty house. The ranch is located near Amarillo in the Texas Panhandle, where the high plains stretch as far as the eye can see, and the heat only breaks when the rain comes, and sometimes not even then. That day, I was fixing the gate at the south pasture when I saw the scene. Martha was known to everyone around there. 73 years old, an old-timer who had stayed on the property after the old owner died. His son, Austin, tolerated her presence out of respect for his father, but it was obvious that it would not last forever. Martha lived in a little shack behind the main house, near the old barn, and spent her days doing small chores nobody asked her to do, sweeping the porch, watering the plants, caring for animals nobody else wanted. Thunder was one of those animals, a flea-bitten gray mare with her ribs poking through who had arrived on a cull truck, so skinny she could barely stand on her own 4 legs. Austin had made it clear that the animal would be sold by the pound or sent to the slaughterhouse if she did not show improvement in 30 days. Martha did not ask for permission. She started using part of her meager social security check to buy mineral supplements and quality feed, hiding the heavy bags in the back of the old barn. I knew this because sometimes I saw her carrying the heavy sacks, staggering under the weight, too stubborn to accept help. I never asked why. Lonely people recognize lonely people from afar, and you learn to respect each other's space. But that morning, while Austin laughed on the porch, and the other ranch hands laughed along with him, something bothered me. It was not the laughter. It was Martha's silence. The way she stayed kneeling in the mud, pouring the mash into the makeshift trough, ignoring everything around her. There was a determination in that which I recognized. It was the same determination that made me get up every day, even when my bed seemed more welcoming than anything the world had to offer. I finished fixing the gate and went back to my routine, but the image stuck with me. Over the next few days, I started paying attention. Martha spent hours with Thunder. She spoke softly to the animal, stroked her muzzle, cleaned her hooves with care. The mare slowly started to respond. It was nothing spectacular, just small gestures, like turning her head when Martha arrived, approaching the trough without fear, letting the old woman touch her neck without flinching. It was on the 5th day that the first problem happened. Vic and Jay, 2 younger ranch hands who liked to suck up to Austin, opened the gate to Thunder's pasture by mistake. The mare escaped onto the dirt road. I was near the corral when I saw Martha run, literally run, with those thin, crooked legs, her breath short, chasing after the animal. I dropped what I was doing and went after her, not out of pity, out of instinct. When I caught up to Martha, she'd already covered almost 1.5 miles, dragging the lead rope, her hands full of scratches from the barbed wire she had used to steady herself on the climb. Thunder was standing by a curve, sniffing the air as if waiting for her. "Let me take her," I said, reaching out to grab the rope. Martha looked at me. Her eyes were red, but not from crying, from exhaustion, from contained anger. "I will take her," she said, and kept walking. I walked beside her in silence. When we got back to the ranch, Austin was on the porch. "You could have saved yourself the trouble, Miss Martha. She is not worth your knees." The laughter returned. She did not answer. But I saw something in that moment. I saw the mare following Martha without resistance, obeying the gentle pressure of the rope, walking with her head down beside the old woman like someone who recognizes a bond that goes beyond training. And I also saw the look on Austin's face. It was not just mockery, it was discomfort. That night, sitting on the porch of my house with a cold cup of coffee in my hand, I thought about Martha and Thunder. I thought about the stubbornness of caring for something nobody else wanted. I thought about my own life, this routine that repeats itself pointlessly, these days that pass without leaving a mark. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something besides emptiness. The following days brought intense heat, the kind of heat that cracks the earth and dries up the water troughs. Martha would wake up before 5 to make sure Thunder had access to the water tank before the other animals drank whatever was left. I would see her walk by with her boots heavy with dust, her straw hat tilted to block the sun that was already burning at 6 in the morning. It was during this time that I started noticing something disturbing. Thunder was being systematically pushed away from the fullest water tank by the other horses. Martha watched, trying to intervene, but she did not have the strength to move the other animals. The cruel hierarchy of the pasture was playing out right in front of my eyes, and I could not help but see the parallel, Martha being pushed to the edges of the ranch, Thunder being pushed away from the water. On one extremely hot day, Thunder collapsed from exhaustion near the fence. Martha ran over and fell to her knees on the dry dirt, pouring water from her own canteen onto the animal's muzzle. Vic drove by on the tractor, took a look, and did not stop. I stopped. I got out of my truck, grabbed the extra bucket I kept in the bed, and helped Martha in silence. She did not thank me. She did not need to. We just stayed there, the two of us kneeling in the hot dirt, until Thunder started breathing steadily again. When I stood up, I felt the weight of my own knees complaining. Martha stood up slowly too, holding onto the fence to balance herself. Our eyes met for a second, and in that second, I recognized in her the exact same exhaustion I carried every single day. The exhaustion of someone who keeps going because stopping would be worse. "Thank you," she said softly. I did not answer. I just nodded and went back to my truck. But something had changed. What I did not know back then was that Martha carried a burden that went far beyond taking care of Thunder. I found that out by chance. During a conversation I was not supposed to hear. I was patching up the roof of the old barn when I heard voices coming from the ranch house kitchen. The window was open because of the heat, and the words rang as clear as a church bell. It was Sarah, the cook, talking to Francine, the neighbor who sometimes came to visit Martha. "Austin is pressuring his lawyer to review Miss Martha's housing rights. He says her paperwork is irregular," Sarah was saying, her voice low but firm. "If he pulls this off, she loses the house. And then where is she supposed to go, you guys? At 73 years old." Francine sighed. "That man has no heart. His father treated Martha like family, and now the son wants to kick her out like she is garbage." I kept nailing the shingles, but my hands were shaking. Losing her housing meant Martha would lose everything, the only home she had known for 30 years, and also her access to Thunder. The mare would be left alone in the pasture, with nobody to care for her, and in less than a week Austin would find a way to get rid of her. I climbed down from the roof, feeling a lot heavier than when I went up. That night I sat on my porch, looking at the starry sky, just thinking. I had never been one to stick my nose in other people's business. After I lost my wife, I learned that the world keeps turning with or without us, and that trying to change things only brings more pain. But there was something about that situation that bothered me deep down. Maybe it was the way Martha kept getting up every day, caring for Thunder with the same dedication, even knowing that everything could fall apart at any moment. Or maybe it was just that I was tired of watching bad people win while good people suffered in silence. The next day, I went looking for Dan. He was the oldest ranch hand on the property, had been working there since before I even arrived, and knew every corner of that place. If anyone knew something that could help Martha, it was him. I found Dan near the corral, fixing a pulley. "I need to talk to you," I said. He gave me a sideways glance, his hands covered in grease. "About the old lady and the mare. How did you know?" "Everybody knows, Jim. The difference is that not everybody cares." He dropped a tool and wiped his hands on an old rag. "What do you want to know?" I told him what I'd heard outside the kitchen. Dan listened in silence, chewing on a stalk of grass. When I finished, he spat on the ground and said, "Austin wants to get Martha out of here because she knows things he would rather keep buried." "What kind of things?" Dan looked around, making sure we were alone. "Years ago, before the old man died, Martha saw Austin forging his father's signature on some cattle transfer papers. He siphoned off a chunk of the estate into a hidden account. She never told a soul, out of loyalty to the family and out of fear. But Austin never forgot the look she gave him that day. To him, Martha's a walking witness right in the middle of his territory. I felt my stomach turn. And how do you know all this? Because I saw it too. But I don't say anything because I have a family to feed and I can't afford to lose this job. Dan stared right at me. You, on the other hand, have nothing to lose. Think about that. He went back to work, leaving me standing there with that information weighing heavy on my chest. The days that followed were tense. Martha kept up her routine with Thunder, but I could see the exhaustion piling up. The mare was getting better. Any trained eye could see that. But the supplements Martha bought were running out, and her social security check barely covered the basics. That was when something happened that nobody expected. Claire was a 17-year-old girl who helped Martha take care of Thunder on the weekends. Martha treated the girl almost like a granddaughter, teaching her things about the animals, talking to her, giving her advice. Claire came from a poor family in the neighboring town and made a few bucks doing these odd jobs around the ranch. Austin pulled Claire aside quietly one Saturday afternoon. I was near the shed when I saw the two of them talking by his truck. I could not hear what they were saying, but I saw Austin holding out cash to the girl. She hesitated, looked around, and took it. My blood ran cold. 3 days later, Martha walked into the old barn and found her bags of supplement missing. I was walking by when I heard her muffled cry, not of anger, but of a sadness so deep it hurt to hear. I stepped into the barn and found her standing in the dark, her hands empty, staring at the bare corner where the sacks used to be. "It was Austin," she said, her voice shaking. "Somebody told him where I hid them. I did not need to ask who." We just stood there in the heavy silence of the barn, the smell of old wood and dry hay filling the air. Martha took a deep breath, wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, and walked out without another word. Thunder would still be fed, but now just the bare minimum, whatever was left over. The mare felt the difference. I could see it in her big, alert eyes, as if she were asking without speaking what had changed. That night, I made a decision. I started leaving small portions of feed in Thunder's trough before dawn, slipping away before anyone could see me. It was not much, but it was enough to keep the fire burning. Dan noticed and started doing the same. We did not talk about it. We just did it. Martha never knew, or maybe she did and just didn't say anything. But Thunder kept improving 1 inch at a time, 1 muscle at a time. It was on a hot afternoon when the sun was already dipping toward the horizon, painting the sky orange and purple. that I saw Martha sitting on the pasture fence, watching Thunder graze. I walked over slowly, making no sound, and just stood there beside her. We did not say anything for several minutes. "Do you know why I do this?" she asked suddenly without taking her eyes off Thunder. "No, because I saw this mare, back when she could barely even stand, protect a newborn calf from two rabid dogs. She put her own body right in front of it. Not a single healthy animal in that pasture did that." Martha turned her face to look at me, and her eyes were shining. "I know fire when I see it, Jim. Fire like that doesn't get put out by hunger." I looked at Thunder, grazing peacefully under the colorful sky, and I understood. It was not about saving a mare. It was about recognizing that the things others consider weak can be the strongest of all when the situation demands it. "I know," I said, and this time it was the truth. Martha climbed down from the fence with some difficulty, and I held her arm to help. She did not refuse. We walked back to the houses together in silence as the night descended over the ranch. The heat remained oppressive, but something in the air felt different, as if a storm was brewing far away, still invisible, but inevitable. The storm I felt coming hit in a way nobody saw coming. The weather system formed fast, sweeping down from the northeast with a capricious violence. The warning came too late, just a crackle on the radio in the ranch house kitchen, cut short by the rain that was already hammering the tin roof. In less than 2 hours, the creek that cut through the ranch, which spent months shallow and harmless during the dry season, overflowed with a force that made the ground shake. I woke up to the noise. The water was already lapping at my doorstep. I pulled my boots on in the dark, grabbed my flashlight, and ran out. The pasture was completely flooded. The animals were vocalizing in the dark, terrified, trying to find higher ground. And that was when I thought of Martha and Thunder. I ran to her house. The door was wide open, swinging in the wind, the oil lamp still burning inside. Martha was not there. My heart raced. I turned toward the pasture and saw, in the weak beam of my flashlight, a small silhouette moving in the water. It was her. Martha was wading into the current, using the barbed wire fence as a guide, pushing forward with a stubbornness that did not belong in that fragile body. The water was already up to her waist, and the current was pulling hard. I yelled her name, but the roar of the rain swallowed my voice. I waded in after her. The water was freezing and filthy, full of branches and debris slamming into my legs. I pushed forward as fast as I could, but Martha was already far ahead, dragging herself along the fence toward the deepest part of the pasture. When I finally reached her, she was holding a braided rope, and Thunder was right in front of her, with the water rushing up to the animal's neck. "Martha, go back! You are going to die out here!" I yelled, grabbing her arm. She looked at me with a fury I had never seen before. "Let go of me! She is not staying here!" Thunder whinnied in panic, her hooves kicking at the muddy bottom, trying to find a foothold. The current was pushing the animal sideways, right toward the most dangerous part of the creek. Martha pulled the rope with both hands, and I saw the thin muscles in her arms tense with an effort that seemed impossible. And then Thunder started to move. I don't know if it was her training, if it was their bond, or if it was sheer willpower to survive. But the mare that everybody called weak cut through the current with all 4 hooves, with a determination that left me speechless. Martha held the rope, guiding her, and Thunder followed step by step, fighting against the water that was trying to sweep her away. I grabbed Martha by the waist to support her, and the 3 of us pushed forward together, the old woman, the mare, and me, against the flood that wanted to swallow us whole. That was when I heard the scream. Chris, one of the younger ranch hands, was trapped in a mud sinkhole near the old barn. The water was already up to his chest, and he was sinking deeper with every move. I looked at Martha, I looked at Thunder, I looked at Chris. The decision had to be fast. "Martha, hold on tight," I yelled, and let go of her. I lunged toward Chris, but the mud pulled me in too. I sank up to my knee, then up to my thigh, and the panic started rising in my throat. The force of the water was too much. I was not going to be able to reach him. It was Thunder who reached us. Martha, holding the rope, guided the mare right toward me. Thunder fought the current, digging her hooves into the mud with a strength I never knew she possessed. When the animal got close enough, I grabbed her neck with both hands and hauled myself out of the sinkhole. Martha kept holding the rope, her feet planted in the dirt, her mouth set in a silent effort. Using Thunder as my anchor, I managed to reach Chris. He grabbed my arm in pure desperation, and together we dragged ourselves over to the mare's neck. Thunder did not back down. She stood firm, bearing the weight of 2 grown men, while Martha pulled the rope, guiding all of us back to higher ground. When we finally dragged ourselves out of the water, we collapsed onto the muddy ground, gasping for air. Chris coughed, spitting up dirty water. I was shivering from the cold and the exhaustion. Martha was on her knees, her hands still gripping the rope, her face covered in mud and tears that I couldn't tell were from relief or sheer fatigue. Thunder stood tall right beside her, breathing heavily, but standing firm. Austin was on the ranch house porch. He had seen the whole thing. The water started receding just as fast as it had risen. When the sun came up, painting the sky a dirty pink, the devastation was clear. Trees knocked down, fences destroyed, flooded corrals. But all the animals were alive, and so was Chris. The ranch hands started the cleanup work. Dan coordinated the crews, and I joined the group checking the damage at the old barn. That was where it happened. Underneath a loose floorboard that had been lifted by the force of the water, I found a rusted metal box. Inside it were old documents, copies of cattle transfers with signatures that any trained eye would recognize as forged. Falsified dates, doctored numbers, the exact proof of what Dan had told me. I picked up the papers with my mud-caked hands and looked over at Dan. He looked right back at me and gave a slow nod. I went looking for Martha. I found her sitting on the bench on her porch, her boots still caked in mud, watching Thunder graze in the pasture as if absolutely nothing had happened. I walked up and handed the documents to her. I found these in the barn. Martha took the papers, reading them in silence. Her expression did not change. She knew exactly what they meant. She held those documents in her hands for a long time, while the sun climbed higher, and the heat began to weigh heavy on the ranch once again. Francine showed up, out of breath from the walk, and sat down next to Martha. Claire came up right behind her, keeping her head down, not having the courage to look at the old woman she had betrayed. An eternity. "Sit down here," she said, patting the bench beside her. Claire sat down, trembling. "I am so sorry, Miss Martha. I never should have." "You are young and you are poor, I understand," Martha said, placing a hand on the girl's shoulder. "But right now, you are going to have to decide who you want to be." The silence that followed was heavy, but it was not a bad heavy. It was the kind of silence that falls when things finally click into their proper place. Austin came out of the main house that afternoon, throwing a suitcase into the back seat of his truck. But when he got to the main gate, it was padlocked. Standing in a line right in front of it were Chris, the man who was still breathing because of Martha and Thunder, along with Dan, John, and a few other ranch hands who had worked there for years. Nobody yelled. Nobody made a single threat. They just stood there, blocking the way, in dead silence. Austin stepped out of his truck, his face flush red. "Get out of my way." Chris took one step forward. "We need to have a little chat about those documents they found in the old barn and about Miss Martha." Austin looked around, searching for backup. He didn't find any. Even Vic and Jay, who had always kissed the ground he walked on, were standing on the other side now. The flood had changed something. It wasn't just the dirt that had been washed away. I stayed on my porch, watching from a distance. Martha was sitting in the rocking chair the old patriarch had given her decades ago. Thunder was grazing peacefully in the pasture under a sun that was finally no longer an enemy. She had seen the fire in that animal when nobody else had. And at the exact moment it mattered most, that fire lit up everything that had been hiding in the shadows. The lawyer arrived 3 days after the flood. He was a city guy, wearing a wrinkled suit and carrying a worn leather briefcase, who parked his car in front of the main house and asked to speak to Austin. But the one who greeted him was Chris, with Dan and John standing right by his side. The documents I had found in the barn were laid out on the porch table, right alongside some other papers that Ellie, the old ranch accountant's daughter, had brought over from an archive nobody even knew existed. I watched the whole thing from a distance, fixing a fence the floodwaters had knocked over. The lawyer read through the documents, his face turning paler by the second. He asked a few questions. He wrote down some names. When he was done, he packed everything back into his briefcase and drove off without saying much. Austin did not come back to the ranch that day, nor the day after. The news spread across the county like a wildfire in dry grass. The son of the old patriarch who had stolen from his own family, the old woman who had kept her silence for years, the mare that had saved lives during the flood. The stories blended together, grew taller, gained details that weren't exactly true, but the heart of them remained completely intact. Martha went right back to her routine, as if nothing had changed. Waking up early, taking care of Thunder, sweeping her porch, watering her plants. But there was something different about her now. A lightness that hadn't been there before. As if a massive weight she had been carrying for years had finally been lifted off her shoulders. Thunder had changed too. The mare that had shown up skinny and weak now had defined muscles, a shiny coat, and a sharp, alert look in her eye. She was not the strongest animal on the ranch, but she was respected. The other horses didn't push her away from the water trough anymore. Whenever she approached, they made room. A week after the flood, Claire came back to the ranch. She walked all the way down the dirt road, carrying a small bag. She found Martha sitting in the shade of the pecan tree, shucking corn. "Miss Martha," the girl said, her voice shaking, "I brought this for you." She opened the bag. Inside was the cash Austin had given her, every single bill still folded, completely untouched. Martha looked at the money, then up at the girl. "You didn't spend any of it." "I couldn't. Every time I went to spend it, I remembered the look on your face when you found those bags missing." Claire started to cry. "I betrayed the only person who was ever good to me without asking for anything in return." Martha stayed quiet for a moment. Then she took the money, counted the bills slowly, and split the stack right down the middle. She held half out to Claire. "Take it." "No, I can't do that." "Take it, and use it to pay for that trade school you want to go to. But remember this. Money that comes from doing the wrong thing never brings anything right. The other half I'm going to use to buy some good feed for Thunder. That way we turn something dirty into something clean." Claire took the money with shaking hands, threw her arms around Martha, and walked away crying. I saw the whole thing from the shed window, and I felt a tightness in my chest. That was what real forgiveness looked like. The kind that hurts, but the kind that heals. The days went by, and the ranch started getting back on its feet. Chris took over some of the management duties temporarily, alongside Dan. The ranch hands were working harder, as if the heavy burden of Austin's presence had been sucked right out of the air. Even the weather seemed kinder. White clouds in a bright blue sky, a gentle breeze, and just the right amount of rain. It was on a clear, sunny afternoon that I made my decision. I went looking for Martha out in the pasture where she was brushing Thunder. The mare was letting the old woman run the brush all over her body, her eyes half closed in pure contentment. "Martha, I need to talk to you." She stopped and looked at me. "Speak your mind." "I've been thinking about buying Thunder. Paying a fair price, getting all the paperwork right, but leaving her right here with you. That way, Austin can't do a thing about it and you never have to worry again. Martha just stared at me for a long time. Then she shook her head. You don't need to do that, Jim. What do you mean I don't need to? She smiled, a small, tired, but genuine smile. That lawyer who came out here wasn't just Austin's lawyer. He worked for the whole family. And he came to see me yesterday. The old patriarch's rightful heirs, his grandkids who live up in Dallas. He found out about everything. They are taking over all the properties that Austin siphoned away. And as a thank you for what I did, keeping my mouth shut all those years just to protect their father's memory, they gave me the deed to the house I live in. And they gave me Thunder, too. She's mine now, completely legal and on paper. I felt such a massive wave of relief that I almost fell backward. Is that really true? It is, and there's more. They want to hire Dan as the official ranch manager, and they want you two to run the cattle, with a fair salary and everything done by the book. I looked at Thunder, then at Martha, then up at the endless blue sky above us. For the first time in 7 years, ever since I lost my wife, I felt something that felt a whole lot like hope. We did it, I said softly. No, Thunder did it. She's the one who showed everybody that strength has absolutely nothing to do with size. It has everything to do with never giving up. I stood there watching Martha go back to brushing the mare, and I realized she was absolutely right. It wasn't about an old woman saving an animal. It was about two souls who recognized themselves in each other's weakness and decided that this was not going to be how their story ended. The weeks that followed brought changes that had seemed completely impossible before. Austin never came back. Rumor had it he went up to Dallas to try and reverse the situation legally, but didn't have any luck. The patriarch's grandkids showed up at the ranch. City kids, but deeply respectful. They listened to Dan, they listened to the ranch hands, and they listened to Martha. And they made decisions that truly honored their grandfather's memory. The ranch started prospering in a way it hadn't in years. With Dan handling the business honestly, no skimming, no stealing, the money actually started growing. We rebuilt the corrals, bought brand new equipment, hired more hands, and Thunder got a pasture all to herself, with plenty of shade and a crystal clear water trough. On a bright, clear morning 3 months after the flood, I woke up and looked out my window. I saw Martha walking through the pasture with Thunder right by her side. No rope, no halter, just the two of them walking together, the old woman and the mare, like old friends who don't even need words to understand each other. And I realized that I had changed too. The house that used to feel so empty now had flowers in the window. Sarah had given me some cuttings and taught me how to take care of them. The routine that used to feel like a burden now had a real purpose. I wasn't just a man killing time waiting for his days to run out anymore. I was a part of something bigger. That night, sitting on the porch with a hot cup of coffee, I looked up at a brand new way, built right on top of the rubble of what used to be. Martha came walking down the dirt road, taking her time, and came up to sit right next to me. We just sat there in the quiet, listening to the crickets sing, feeling the cool night breeze dry the sweat of the day. "Thank you, Jim," she said out of nowhere. "For what?" "For staying. For not turning your back when you easily could have. You're the one who taught me not to give up, you and Thunder." Martha chuckled softly. Funny how life works out, isn't it? You think you're saving somebody else, but in the end, you find out you're the one being saved.